This movie covers subtopic 7.1, Energy Choices and Security, under the main topic of IBESS Topic 7, Climate Change and Energy Production. There is a range of different energy sources available to societies that vary in their sustainability, availability, cost, and socio-political implications. The choice of energy sources is controversial and complex. Energy security is an important factor in making energy choices. Energy security is an adequate, reliable, affordable supply of energy that provides a degree of independence. Energy security does mean being free of dependence on other countries for energy. Energy security results from what is available: oil, wind, water, sun, and how much there is. Countries, particularly those in the Middle East, shown here in red, have the largest oil reserves in the world. Thus, because of the high availability of fossil fuels, these countries have high energy security. But fossil fuels are non-renewable, so energy security could change depending on how the energy is used. Look at this graph that illustrates the ratio of oil reserves to production over the years. This is an indication of a depletion of the oil reserves. As oil reserves disappear, energy security will decrease. Could societies choose energy sources that are more sustainable than other sources? Yes, of course they can. But keep in mind that each source of energy has its advantages and disadvantages. An inequitable availability and uneven distribution of energy sources may lead to conflict. This map, coupled with this diagram, illustrate the uneven distribution of oil reserves in the world. Take, for example, the idea that Saudi Arabia in the Middle East supplies oil to France in Europe. Thus, Saudi Arabia has leverage or influence over France. This unequal relationship in energy could lead to conflict. In this example, France has less energy independence than it might be comfortable with. Energy security is partly dependent on the socioeconomic status of a country. Some societies demand more energy than others. For example, even though the United States has oil availability, it imports oil from Canada, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Mexico, and Colombia. It has energy dependence on several countries. Energy security could be enhanced by reducing energy needs. This form of transportation requires far less energy than this form of transportation. Energy needs have changed over time. As we have industrialized, energy needs have increased. In this graph, you can see in the early 1800s, wood and dung biomass was the main energy source. Then coal was discovered, and the per use of wood decreased while coal increased. And as the use of oil increased, the further use of coal and wood decreased. In the future, per capita oil consumption will decrease as natural gas consumption increases. Keep in mind, however, that despite these per capita changes, the use of wood and dung still remain a main energy source for lower economically developed countries. The energy choices adopted by a society may be influenced by availability, sustainability, scientific and technological developments, cultural attitudes, and political, economic, and environmental factors. These, in turn, affect energy security and independence. Factors that affect energy choices for a society include the availability based on ecology. What is the natural availability within the borders and outside of the borders? What can be imported? Technological developments. Does a country have the ability to use technology to harness energy from new sources, like wave power? Politics. What are the relationship with the suppliers of the energy? I already mentioned that if a country is supplying energy, it has leverage or power over that dependent country. Economics. What is the cost of energy? Is it cheaper to make it locally or to import it? Cultural attitudes. The choices made by societies, such as a preference for cars powered by fossil fuels or an environmental value system that includes conservation or concern over environmental issues, or tolerance for risky sources of energies like nuclear power, all of these are factors that affect the energy choices of a society. A factor affecting energy choices is availability. I already mentioned the unequal distribution of fossil fuel in the world. Similarly, there are some countries with coastal borders that have the opportunity to develop wind farms, but not all locations in the world experience high levels of wind, or some countries have large quantities of solar energy, consider the desert biomes, that can harness solar energy. And some countries have a higher density of rivers that could be used for harnessing hydropower. This is the Three Gorges Dam in China, the largest hydro facility in the world. Keep in mind that inequitable availability and uneven distribution determine energy choices and can also work towards conflict. Science and technology affect energy choices. Harnessing energy from alternative energy sources requires science knowledge and technology that can, when used, increase energy security. Pictured here is the technology of a solar roadway used to harness energy from the sun. Improvements in energy efficiency and energy conservation can limit growth in demand of energy and contribute to energy security. Keep in mind that such improvements require knowledge and technology. Politics can influence energy choices. The Blue Nile River is the Nile's largest tributary and supplies about 85% of the water entering Egypt. Ethiopia is building a $5 billion Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam on the Blue Nile near the border with Sudan. Here's the location. When it completed, it will be the largest dam in Africa. Ethiopia's ambitious project is designed to help lift its fast-growing population out of poverty. But the new dam also puts management of the flow of the Nile in Ethiopia's hands, and that has sparked a power shift in the region and conflict. For the Egyptians, the Nile is literally a lifeline. The vast majority of the country's 97 million people live along its banks. If Ethiopian people, for some reason, want to reduce the amount of water coming to Egypt, it could be a great problem in the region. Ethiopia will have political leverage over countries that depend on the water flowing from the dam. Your textbook gives an example of the gas pipelines distributing gas from Russia to all over Europe. Take a look at that example as well. Economics affect energy choices. Look at this graph of per capita electricity consumption versus per capita GDP, or gross domestic product. The gross domestic product relates to the average income of the society. The higher the income, the higher the energy use. More economically developed countries consume more energy than less economically developed countries. Higher use of energy creates a higher need, which influences energy choices. Another factor that influences energy choices and energy security is how big a population is and how fast it's growing. This graph displays population versus time in several countries. You can see that India and China are populations that require a lot of energy because of their high numbers. Furthermore, if a population is growing, more energy will be required in the future. The cost of energy itself will influence energy choices. Here you can see the price of crude oil in dollars per barrel from 2015 with projections out to 2025. As prices go up, the energy becomes less affordable and the supply of it is therefore less secure. This could motivate countries to look at investing in alternative sources of energy. In this slide, you are looking at the relative costs of starting a facility that generates energy from various sources. This is a projection of the relative cost of starting service in 2022. You can see that Solar is slightly more expensive than hydro, slightly more expensive than wind energy to get started. The cost of these energy sources are also much less than these non-renewable sources of coal, nuclear, and gas. The cost of an energy source influence its availability, thus influencing societal choice of energy. Culturally, societies can choose to use alternative energy sources. Many countries are committed to renewable energy sources. Stop the movie for a minute and study the percentages of energy coming from alternative sources in these different countries. Cultural attitudes about the environment can affect energy choices. Wind turbines can impact wildlife and habitats. Most notably, birds and bats are affected. Like wind turbines, solar panels require land and water use for their construction. Geothermal plants can affect water quality. Hydroelectric plants greatly impact land and wildlife. Ecological damage due to fossil fuel industry drives the pursuit of biofuels. Finally, nuclear power plant disasters such as Chernobyl in 1986 and Fukushima in 2011 make some countries uncomfortable with the use of nuclear power. Other countries, like France, however, enjoy energy dependence because of its interest in nuclear power. Improvements in energy efficiencies and energy conservation can reduce energy demand and contribute to energy security. This is all about making the technology better to harness energy from alternative sources more efficiently. Energy efficiency is the percent of total energy that is useful. It is the percent of useful energy out of total available energy, where useful or net energy is the total energy available minus the energy needed to extract, process, and deliver. Stop the movie and look at these images, these diagrams, and see how they connect to this information on this side of the slide. Here is an illustration of the efficiency of different energy sources. Some sources of energy are more efficient. Energy efficiency influences energy security and will drive energy choices. As technology improves, efficiency will increase, making alternative energy sources more and more efficient options for harvesting energy. Improvements in energy efficiencies and energy conservation can limit growth in energy demand and contribute to energy security. Societies might choose to live in such a way to reduce energy usage. Societies could choose more energy efficient materials when building, choose to drive less, choose to turn off the lights, choose to unplug electrical cords when not being used, etc. Improvements in conservation of energy can limit growth in energy demand and contribute to energy security. There is a range of different energy sources available to societies that vary in their sustainability, availability, cost, and socio-political implications. There are two categories of energy, non-renewable and renewable. Only renewable energy sources are sustainable. Again, energy sources can be divided into two main categories. The first category is non-renewable, such as fossil fuels, including coal, oil, and natural gas, and nuclear energy. Renewable energy is the second category, which includes hydropower, biomass, solar, wind, tidal wave, and geothermal energy. You need to be able to provide an outline with description of the range of energy resources available to society. You also need to be able to evaluate the advantages and disadvantages of different energy sources. On this side, you can already see the outline of different energy sources available to society. Let's first talk generally about the advantages and disadvantages of non-renewable resources. Fossil fuels contribute to the majority of humankind's energy supply, and they vary in the impact of their production and in their emissions. The use of fossil fuels is expected to increase to meet global energy demand. However, the harvest rates of non-renewable resources always exceeds the replacement rate. Look at this graph that shows as a population increases, the demand for fossil fuels also increases. As one resource runs out, pictured here, oil and gas, the demand for the other resources will increase, like coal and nuclear energy. However, there is a finite time that these resources will be available because the harvest rates of non-renewable resources always exceed the replacement rates. Fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas, are extracted from the earth. The fossil fuels are transported via ship, train, truck, or pipeline to a refinery. At every step of the process, energy is lost, reducing efficiency. Generally speaking, there are several advantages to using fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are relatively cheap. They yield a high quality of energy that is quite versatile. It can be used in many industries. One of the biggest reasons why fossil fuels are so important in modern society is their use in the combustion engine, which most of the Western world is dependent on. Fossil fuel energy is efficient and it's easy to transport. Generally speaking, there are several disadvantages to the use of fossil fuels for energy. First of all, they are non-renewable. Their amounts are finite. They also emit pollutants when burned. Gases released from fossil fuel combustion include carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxide, sulfur oxide, and ozone. Remember that the release of carbon dioxide through the burning of fossil fuels is changing our climate. Now let's get into some details. Coal comes from fossilized plants laid down during the Carboniferous period. Coal is mined from seams of coal, which are in a strata between other types of rock. Coal may be open cast, as seen here in large pits, or by tunnels underground, as seen here. Coal is burned to provide heat directly or electricity by burning to create steam-driven turbines in power stations. Stop the movie and study the advantages and disadvantages of coal used. But note in particular that, unlike the other fossil fuels, it creates soot particles, seen as smog, when burned, causing both environmental and health problems. And when it is mined, it results in severe land degradation. Oil comes from fossilized plants and microorganisms that are compressed to a liquid and found in porous rocks. Crude oil is refined by fractional distillation to give a variety of products from lighter jet fuels and petrol to heavier diesel. Oil is extracted by oil wells. Many oil fields are under the oceans, so extraction is dangerous. Pipes are drilled down to the oil-bearing rock to pump the oil out. Most of the world economy runs on oil, either burned directly in transport and industry or to generate electricity. Stop the movie and study the advantages and disadvantages of oil as an energy source. Methane gas and other hydrocarbons are trapped between seams of rock. These natural gases are extracted by drilling, like crude oil. Often natural gas is found with crude oil. Natural gas can be used directly in homes to produce domestic heating and cooking. Make sure to stop the movie and study the advantages and disadvantages of natural gas as an energy source. Uranium is the raw material that powers nuclear energy. Uranium is radioactive and is split in nuclear reactors by bombarding it with neutrons. As it splits into other elements, massive amounts of energy are also released. Uranium is mined. Australia has the most known reserves. Canada exports the most. Other countries have small amounts. About 80 years' worth of uranium is left to mine at current rates, but could be extracted from seawater. Again, make sure to stop the movie and study the advantages and disadvantages of nuclear energy as an energy source. Sources of energy with lower carbon dioxide emissions than fossil fuels include renewable energy forms: solar, biomass, hydropower, wind, wave, tidal, and geothermal. The use of renewable forms of energy is expected to increase. Hydroelectric energy is harnessed from the movement of water through rivers, lakes, and dams to power turbines to generate electricity. Its pumped storage reservoirs power turbines. Again, stop the movie to study the advantages and disadvantages of hydroelectric power. Take special note of this infographic on the impacts of dams to the environment. Biomass is decaying organic plant or animal waste that is used to produce methane in biogas generators or is used to be burned directly as dung plant material. More processing of this biomass can give oils like oilseed rape, oil palms, or sugarcane, which can be used as fuels in vehicles instead of diesel fuel. These are called biofuels. Again, stop the movie and study the advantages and disadvantages of biomass as a form of energy. Wood from felling or coppicing trees is burned to generate heat and light. Again, stop the movie and study the advantages and disadvantages of using wood as an energy source. Solar. Photovoltaic cells, as seen here, convert solar radiation into electricity via chemical energy. For concentrated solar power, mirrors are arranged to focus solar energy in one point where heat energy generated drives a steam turbine to make electricity. For passive solar power, buildings or panels are used to capture and store heat. Again, stop the movie and study the advantages and disadvantages of using solar energy. Wind turbines, or modern windmills, turn wind energy into electricity. They can be found singularly, but usually they are found together in groups to form wind farms. Stop the movie and study the advantages and disadvantages of using wind as an energy source. Tidal energy is the movement of seawater in and out that drives turbines. A tidal barrage, a kind of dam, is built across estuaries, forcing water through gaps. In the future, underwater turbines may be possible out at sea and without a dam. Again, stop the movie and study the advantages and disadvantages of using tidal energy. Wave energy. The movement of seawater in and out of a cavity on the shore compresses trapped air, driving a turbine. Stop the movie and study the advantages and disadvantages of using wave energy. It is possible to use heat under the earth in volcanic regions. This is called geothermal energy. Cold water is pumped into earth and comes out as steam. Steam can be used for heating or to power turbines, creating electricity. Stop the movie and study the advantages and disadvantages of using geothermal energy. All fossil fuels release carbon dioxide when burned. True, natural gas is cleaner than coal and oil, but sources of energy with lower carbon dioxide emissions than all the fossil fuels include the renewable energy forms, right? Hydro, ocean, wind, nuclear, biomass, solar, geothermal. The use of renewable forms of energy is expected to increase. In this graph, you can see the increase in global energy consumption over time of different energy sources. There are drastic increases in the use of non-renewable energy resources such as gas, oil, and coal, while there are moderate increases in the use of renewable resources such as wind, geothermal, solar, and hydroelectric. You should be able to identify and discuss these trends on various types of graphs. Pause this movie and study the graphs to verify the same trends I discussed in the previous slide. Furthermore, note the continued use of biofuels such as wood and dung in less economically developed countries, as they still depend on these sources of energy for heating their homes and cooking their food. Notice that 17% of energy consumed is renewable energies. As of 2013, biomass and hydro dominate. There was a large increase in the world in the use of energy since the 1950s, representing increasing population and increasing affluences worldwide. Again, study these graphs so that you can verify those trends. Finally, note the trends and patterns of oil consumption in this graph. Notice that generally speaking, more economically developed countries are those that consume more energy per capita as compared with the lower economically developed countries. However, there are regions of the world that are moving towards more sustainable energy, lowering their dependence on oil. The amount of carbon dioxide released to the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels is increasing. And again, this contributes to the change of our climate. But per capita emissions do not necessarily relate to the size of the country, as shown in this graph. Russia, China, and India have shown rapid growth in emissions due to industrialization. But per capita, their emissions are still below US, Canada, Saudi Arabia, and Australia. To recap the contents of this IBESS Topic 7.1 movie, there is a range of different energy sources available to societies that vary in their sustainability, availability, cost, and sociopolitical implications. Energy security is an important factor in making energy choices. Energy security is an adequate, reliable, and affordable supply of energy that provides a degree of independence. The energy choices adopted by a society may be influenced by availability, sustainability, scientific and technological developments, cultural attitudes, and political, economic, and environmental factors. These in turn affect energy security and independence. There is a range of different energy sources available to societies that vary in their sustainability, availability, cost, and sociopolitical implications. Energy is divided into two categories, non-renewable and renewable. Improvements in energy efficiencies and energy conservation can limit growth in energy demand and contribute to energy security. This ends the movie for IBESS Topic 7.1, Energy Choices and Security, under the main Topic 7 of Climate Change and Energy Productions. The slides were created by me, Dr. Nina Markham. Images are courtesy of Creative Commons unless otherwise indicated with a citation under the image. If all images on a slide are from the same source, the source is simply cited at the bottom of the slide. Additional insight was obtained from Mr. Dave Hoover's YouTube channel, also a valuable resource for you. Other resource for you is your IBESS textbook, whether in hardback form or online, such as Cognity. Thank you for listening.